All right, Helen. So I'm so happy that you're joining me here today for this conversation and insights and as you know, my favorite inquiry, self-inquiry, which I know you're very open to and is an important part of your life. But I thought maybe we'll since I know about you, but I don't know anything really about your journey and sort of where you've come from, maybe that as a way of introduction for people to hear about who you are,
Hmm.
what your journey's been like, especially this internal journey that we all are so curious about and how that looks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of wondering if there's any other kind of journey.
I know, right? True.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And how potted do you want it? Because I guess I can talk about that for 3 minutes and I can talk about it for probably 3 hours.
Yeah. Well,
Somewhere between those two.
right. Yeah, maybe something in between because it's so curious sometimes what I mean I find like I'll see what comes up. I mean that curiosity of a pull towards there's must be something different or must be something or if there was a bit of
Mm.
suffering or whatever. I think that's kind of interesting to see,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah,
the,
absolutely.
the points that occurred. And I know there can be quite a bit in there with what happens with somebody in their life. So
Yeah, 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 yeah. And you know what is, as you're saying that, what's actually coming up for me, and I'm sure you're the same, wherever we're sharing about ourselves, there's always a kind of unique, or for me at least, there's always a uniqueness to what comes out or what gets emphasized or what seems important. But as you were saying that, it actually felt really important to go all the way back to university, which is surprising because I don't often go back that far.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
Um, but I'll run through those kind of those years prior to spirituality. Because yeah, for whatever reason, it feels important context.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so at uni, I did chemistry for my degree.
Hmm.
Having come from a family who pretty much always did um, things like doctor, teacher, dentist, professions, people did real jobs.
Yes.
And I was like, well, I don't like the look of any of those jobs. I kind of like chemistry. I'll do chemistry was my process.
Mhm.
Although interestingly, prior to that, I'd actually been interested in doing psychology. And then my mum wasn't so keen on that. So I changed direction and thought, well, chemistry will do. I quite like that as a subject. But I guess it's interesting in that that psychology element was there and then got quashed, but came back
Yeah.
later. But also the fact that in doing chemistry, I did see myself as very logical, very rational, very sensible, very I do science because science is hard and fast and reliable and you know where you are with science kind of thing.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily consciously know that at the time, but I can see that as I came into this spiritual exploration, there was definitely a letting go of that idea that yeah, that Helen's this rational one who does science and does logic and gets it all to add up neatly,
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So from there I went briefly into accountancy, very briefly, because that really didn't connect for me. Um, then moved into HR for most of my kind of working life career, which was about 15 years or something.
Oh,
The
yeah.
latter 10 of which was corporate. So for those
Oh,
who
yeah.
may be listening from the UK, Boots UK, who yeah, pharmacy, beauty, health retailer. Um, so I had 10 great years there and then started to get really disillusioned. Um, I had a hip replacement in 2013, and that gave me 3 months away from the business and lots of time to think because my kids were still going to nursery as though I was at work, and school. Actually, my eldest one was at school at that point, and so it gave me 3 days of time to myself. Yes, to do my physio and recovery stuff, but also I discovered Twitter. That Facebook wasn't interesting enough. There wasn't enough,
Uh-huh.
everyone who I was friends with on Facebook was at work during the day. So
Uh-huh.
Twitter was a great
Wow.
discovery that it's like,
Uh-huh.
oh, look, people who are chatting during a work day. Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I found a whole bunch of people who were freelance, consultants in the space of HR, learning and development, culture development, all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So that combined with somebody pointing me in the direction of coaching meant that when I came back to work, yeah, it just wasn't the same. It was like, oh my goodness, it's all this same stuff. Nothing has changed. Um, the program I was working on at the time, the project I was leading, had had done what all projects did ever, which was they were really successful in the regions where the regional team were on board with it and engaged, and it was flopping in the places where the regional team weren't interested in it. And the business was pulling back from leadership development investment. And I was just like, oh, this isn't lighting me up. This isn't what I want.
Mm.
So I stayed for I must have come back in the September, and I left the following March. So it's just
Yeah.
the bubble had been burst. It was like, yeah,
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore.
Wow. Yeah.
And in that transition period, I trained as a psychology-based coach. So that was my first, that was that return
Oh,
to psychology.
got it. Outside of your program,
And
like anything to do with your work. It's something that you, yeah, move towards. Okay.
well, yeah, at that
Yeah.
point, so yeah, I'd had a little taster of this coaching at a company here, Barefoot Coaching, provide training to people. And it was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. So
Uh-huh.
I was absolutely lit up by that, and that was the direction I wanted to go in. So I trained with them through my notice period, left, set up the business with no clients, nothing. It was just, I
Oh,
just have to leave.
wow.
Like there was no, yeah, I just couldn't stay. My husband could see I was
Yeah.
really unhappy there,
Yeah.
so it was time to go.
Sometimes that's nice to be very clear. This is a no. Because then there's
Yeah.
like that, because it takes a bit of courage because you're making such a change and you're changing family income and dynamics and all that kind of stuff. But it's like if it's very
Mm,
clear that it's a no, all
mm,
right, um,
mm.
at least, I don't have to have that angst. Maybe I shouldn't have left, even if
Yeah,
you
yeah,
do
yeah.
think that sometimes.
Oh
But
my
yeah,
goodness, yeah.
yeah.
So much that, Grace. Because actually at the same time I had been applying for other jobs. And so there was another job I could have gone to with a car
Oh,
dealer and
ah,
car organization.
yeah,
And it was like, oh, this is like frying pan into the fire. I would literally be just changing the name of the company I'm working for, and all the stuff is just the same stuff. And
yeah,
yeah, so that
yeah,
actually really helped with that clear no,
yeah,
because
yeah,
that wasn't lighting me up. So when I resigned, after 10 years with the company, and so many people were like, "Oh, this is so big. I can't believe you're doing this. Or how are
yeah.
you doing this?" And I'm like, it's just so obvious that it doesn't feel scary. It doesn't feel dangerous. I had my Twitter friends who had all done it before me and who were like a great network to have. So
Well,
yeah, so
I love
it was just amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so I ran my business actually only for, so that was 2014. It was 2017 when the wheels started coming off again.
Oh,
I'd
yes.
only been doing it 3 years.
Uh-huh.
Um, Leadership development, culture development, coaching, coaching leadership teams,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah,
then starting to look around at my life and saying, this isn't working.
mm,
I'm being with these leaders and being really calm and being really emotionally intelligent, and then I'm coming home to my family and I'm being really stressed and horrible with my kids, and like
uh-huh.
how I can't weigh up those two things. I can't in all good faith sit with these
Uh,
leaders and say, oh yes, this psychology stuff is definitely the right thing to do, when I'm then going home and behaving like a completely different person.
ah,
um
yeah,
and so that was a big turning point for me in
yeah,
moving into the spiritual. So one of the things you said at that intro was about this, like, what's next, like, or what's going on kind of question.
yeah,
That was all there. So it's, yeah, what is going on? How can I be such different people? This isn't fair on my kids. This psychology stuff, yeah, can't be the answer, or at least not the whole answer. And the phrase "there must be something else" was so prevalent. Like there must be something deeper, there must be something more available. And so I feel like that all of that and some other things that happened around relationships that year. I also started yoga, and my yoga teacher talking about the Buddha had me go, he sounds kind of interesting. So all of that was the beginning of opening
uh,
the door to the spiritual. world.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
go, I guess this then connects all the way back to the chemistry stuff, where I was like, no one was more surprised than me that I was
Wow.
going into
Yeah.
spiritual exploration.
Uh,
What's all this about? I'm meant to be
yeah.
logical and rational and
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's I don't know. That's wonderful and exciting. So I want to say to everybody here listening, you've written a book. And so I'd
yeah,
love to hear then. So something opened up, you hear
yeah,
about the Buddha, you're doing yoga, you're like,
yeah.
this is in this segment, but it doesn't seem to be permeating all of life,
Mm,
me and
mm.
my family, and kind of noticing that real difference. I totally get that. Um, yeah, so so then what happened?
Yeah, so that was 2018 when I first worked with a coach who like very purposefully
Ah,
on I guess so what I was working on to start with was actually what so Amy Johnson, our mutual contact, the three principles as originated by Sid Banks. This guy that I came across, Piers Thurston, I heard him on my friend's podcast and I was like, oh my goodness, he's talking about the Buddha stuff, but he's talking about it in such a like normal person way.
ah,
He was
yeah.
working with businesses and working with leaders, and at that time that was still my primary customer group was leaders in business. And so I'd kind of been looking for and did feel like I was following this breadcrumb trail of, okay, I want to do some stuff like the Buddha said, but I want to do it with business and I want it to sound normal. I want it to sound like for anybody. I
Uh-huh.
don't want it I'm not interested in stuff that people will think is airy fairy woo woo.
Sure.
There's plenty of I had lots of judgment around that kind of stuff. That had a
Yeah.
lot I'd
Yeah.
basically labeled all of spirituality that.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
I was still in that place at that time. It's like, no,
Mhm.
I want practical. I want
Mhm.
and that's still a theme actually that
Yeah.
stays with me through my work. It's just that I don't have the judgment of the other stuff anymore.
Yeah.
The practical has always been so important to me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, so I heard Piers on this podcast and actually I started crying. I was like, oh my goodness, he's saying and talking about exactly the thing that I want to be doing. And he's
Uh,
doing it with the kind of clients that I want to be doing it with. So that became an absolute no-brainer that I was going to work with him one-to-one. So we started that summer of 2018. And in fact, within a few weeks, I had a huge awakening experience. I I won't go into the full detail. If people want to read it, I could share the link if you like, where I've shared the full story. But essentially, I had a thought, which was kind of a common thought, and then it was like a bolt of light, not lightning, because it was very loving. Bolt of light came and like was almost like shone on this thought, and the whole thing just gave way. Like the whole premise of why
oh,
that thought was even there was like, oh, why am I thinking that? Why is what's that about? And so all these thoughts came tumbling, 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 all, yeah, kind of like a cascade, like a jenga pile
wow.
falling down,
Yeah.
including some very fundamental ones around my upbringing and my childhood and these stories I had around my dad. And it's like, well, none of them are true either. Like the whole thing just collapsed.
Oh,
And I was left in a state of absolute bliss. It was amazing.
wow.
And a real, really deep sense of okayness. And in fact, I was saying over and over again, I'm okay, I'm okay. Like
Um,
smiling and crying and
oh,
just this such
great.
deep, yeah, it never left again. That sense of I'm okay was
Wow.
never ever fully covered over ever again. It was such an opening. But as often happens, because it was an experience rather than stabilized awakening, and that's normal, most people go through a series of awakenings, big, small, doesn't really matter what size they are, but there's
Mhm.
often this oscillation of
Yes.
awakening and then it gets covered over a bit and then it's more and then it's covered over a bit. So when that covering over happened, I then went to work with a lady called Claire Diamond, who works much more in that space of understanding that psychological narrative and that all the stories that
Mm.
come up, all the doubts and all the um, self-referential stuff.
Uh,
Um, so I worked with her for a couple of years, and it was great and challenging. You know, sometimes some of the best stuff we do can be really challenging.
yes,
It was
true.
quite, and it can be quite messy. You know, after an awakening experience, it can. I was still functioning perfectly fine. You know, I was still
Yes.
running a
Yeah.
business and looking after two kids, and I don't think anybody in the outside world would say, "Oh, yes, you were going through a lot then." You know, I think to everybody
Right.
else, it all carried
Having a
on quite
nervous
normally.
breakdown. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Right.
in my coaching sessions, in my like that inner journey you said at the very start,
Yeah.
from that perspective, it was like,
Yeah.
yeah, there was heartbreak, there were tears, there were looking at some of the worst fears, some of the worst aspects of who, you know, gosh, I can't believe I'm such a terrible mother. You know, I've done everything I can to avoid being a terrible mother, and here I am being a terrible mother. You know, it was all
Yes.
there was loads of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's
and
so,
all for the good, you know, it all that was all part of that enlightenment process to clear up, to resolve, to integrate some of these confusions, really, when we start to attach and identify to who we think we
yeah.
are or who we think we have to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but then by the end of 2021, no, the end of 2020, I was really done with talking. I'm like, oh my God, I have talked about myself and my thoughts and my experience for so long, for like intensively for the last
Yes.
sort of two and
Yes.
a half years.
Yeah.
All through that, also doing a whole bunch of exploration around the three principles, around non-duality. Like all my spare time was spent in videos, podcasts, articles, anything I could consume around that conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
So in 2021, I moved into receiving energy transmissions, which are a way of supporting both awakening and enlightenment. Um, and really, which for me, it was important that it was for awakening. It's like I am so done with this contracted feeling of the belief in separation. I just want
Mm-hmm.
to be awake. I just want to
Mm-hmm.
be fully awake.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And that's what this guy did for me. So 9 months worth of transmissions, kind of fortnightly. And then I was there. It was like, oh,
How wonderful.
so settled,
Yeah.
so
And
quiet.
would you go and just connect and be in his presence, or was that necessary to have the
So we
transmission?
were on Zoom. Yeah, we were on
Okay.
Zoom together
Got
because he
it.
was in the US.
Ah,
Um,
lovely. Yeah.
And I have no idea what he was doing. So I know so I now offer transmissions as well. So I
Uh,
know what I do in transmissions. I have no
uh,
idea what he was doing.
yeah.
But I'm presuming it was a variation on the theme. Because one of
Yeah.
the things he actually said to me was, you must keep your eyes closed during transmissions. And I remember thinking, golly, why? What's because everything else he was quite chilled. He was like, doesn't matter what your mind's doing, doesn't matter if you move around, you know, just be comfortable, but you must keep your eyes closed. And I always remember thinking that's like, are you just actually sitting there having a cup of tea? Like,
Yeah.
is that what's
If I
actually going
peek,
on here?
yeah, if the thought come in of like, oh, if I open my eye, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas when I offer them, I'm quite happy if people want to open their eyes, then you're very welcome
Yeah.
to. It's no problem. So
Yeah.
yeah, for me, it is like being in the presence of the way I do it. I can't speak for him. The way I do it is, yeah, I bring in the intention of a certain vibration of energy, and yeah, so we're essentially sitting in that together to remind somebody's system of that in
Oh,
themselves.
so beautiful.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and gets to places that language just can't get to. You know, it gets
Yeah.
to nooks and crannies that, yeah, language is just too cumbersome for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I completely understand that. Yeah. I sometimes
Mm.
think it just um comes through. It's like I might be working with a person, or there's somebody in a group, and then there's somebody in the group who's speaking, and I just have such a sense of like they are so adorable. Like, but you would never say that right then, like, or like, oh, I just love this person so much. Like, look at them do whatever they're doing. Like it's just this feeling of um just so like sweetness isn't quite the right word because it's a little too small, but it's just
Mm.
such a sense of caring, or just love,
Mm.
I guess, love,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
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 Yeah,
And
that feeling of our nature for sure.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that it was that that then led to the book, because
Ah, yeah.
in that full recognition, it became so obvious to me the distinction between awakening and enlightenment. So before it had just been two words for the same thing, whereas now it was so clear. It's like, oh no, it, to my mind at least, awakening is is just inverted commas there for or given people can't see.
Uh-huh.
It's
Uh-huh.
just that recognition of our essential nature. That's all that awakening is. Because once we see that and we know who we really are, and we know we're not really this separate body mind here, that's not really our yeah, that's not really our essential nature. It's us, but it's not truly us. So that became very obviously that's what awakening is. And then that separated enlightenment off to be all the stuff around our human experience, all the psychological, emotional, physical conditioning that we've collected, which just gets our system a bit wonky. We've collected all sorts of stories and ideas, and both, on all those levels,
Yeah.
that just mean we don't flow that well because we get caught on these hooks along the way that say, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, you have to hold back from that, you have to do more of that, less of
Yeah.
that. Oh no,
Yeah.
that was too much. Oh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Goodness.
So
Fears.
yeah, so that for me is that's a whole separate kind of exploration,
Got it.
that
Yeah. I'm glad
enlightenment
you
part.
sort of shared it in that particular way because I think I've s- we shared about that and knowing your book, which will have everything.
Mm,
I'll put your story and the link to your book,
cool.
in the notes here below. But um yeah, well, just a couple things. I love the that it looks like, there are insights along the way and it's kind of this journey of expansion,
Mm,
and it does really, you know, like, and that's okay. It's like once upon a time, da 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 da, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened, and
yeah.
it kind of looks
Yeah.
like um, that just this journey of change or insights or
Mm,
awareness coming through, and but that it kind of, I appreciate the mentioning of the having some big recognition, and then kind of working with that, all the things behind the enlightenment, the conditioning,
mm,
and
mm,
having more there
yeah.
and seeing. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I had, so as um, Byron Katie, I was kind of on the same kind of, incredibly interested earlier, in a way. Well, earlier, whatever. It's but I kind of wanted to have that track of like, because it looked like people in my family had it with, like being chemistry, or I had a sister who knew she was going to be a professor, just like our father. And um this sort of track taking
Mm,
looked like you're on a more steady path that's sort of
mm,
guaranteed or something. Let's put it
mm,
that way, a little
mm-hmm.
bit, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and I dropped out of college in my freshman year. I mean, I
Oh, wow.
was like, I was having an existential crisis of like, why am I here? What is going on? Then I also had this eating disorder that started right then, like right as I'm leaving home, and in a more intense way. You could say it kind of started, lots of the thoughts started earlier than that. But um, yeah, it was a major left turn,
Mm,
from what I was imagining my life would
mm,
look like and kind of how I saw things. Um, but later, so I'm Byron Katie, I really see her as somebody that is, who is became aware, like sort of had this huge shift of
mm.
consciousness, like this big awakening. I mean, just like an extreme one, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Hers was like mine, but about times a million.
Yeah, yes, yes. I mean, don't even know who I am and what my name is, and not speaking at all for a while,
Mm,
and uh yeah, and I was so fascinated by that. Like I just seeing, because I'd already been doing some of the searching, same type of thing you did, like where you're just wanting to gather and whatever you bump into that looks a little bit like something, that you're curious about, you kind of consume and, oh yeah, that. And I'd already been doing that with so much psychology because of eating disorder, dropping out of college, being a failure, there was some incredibly amazing things, very, very helpful. And one of the therapists at a group that I was in, she had a whole spiritual practice kind of behind the scenes that I learned about later, and I think that, not that a practice is the thing, but there's just something about how she's viewing life that was very nurturing, and for a certain period of time. It was very beautiful. And and more extreme behaviors and depression fell away. But anyway, later, running into Katie, I like hearing about her story because her incorporating that shift of not even being herself anymore at all, very radical, um, and then kind of having to get her feet back on the ground, was interesting. And she'll speak about that as sometimes being a bit frightening, or or just having, I don't know if she would think of it as frightening, but in any case, I had that kind of experience at her school, which is wonderful that you can actually go to a program because that's not, you don't know if that's going to really happen ever. But the invitation to question your thinking day after day for 9 days, and do you have to go to a school to do that? No. I mean, you can, however that shows up, like you've described, you might be questioning it, a bit at a time, but I liked that there was something offered that was a structure, speaking of kind of more like a structure or something that feels practical. And yeah, when by the end of 9 days, and really looking at, oh, this is talking about everything here, and like what I've been thinking about, but looking at that without it for sure knowing that it's true, like death and dying, and being the oldest in my family, or being the failure that dropped out and everybody else is doing okay, but I'm not, or, any of that. And I was just like, I slept for 4 hours a night for 9 months. It was pretty, when I look back on it, and I think at the time I would be thinking, this can't go on, like it was starting to get, it sort of felt like a little bit too high off the ground or something. Like unstable, or something needed to be, but I was just waiting. I wonder when that's going to happen. It was so odd in a way too. And yeah, 9 whole months. And then there was a night when I slept the whole night, and I was like, oh my God. And then there was a little bit of, and then it was just kind of got back into place, like in the body somehow. But I get what you're saying, because that was just so strange and bizarre. And I wouldn't say that I was in any way anxious. I was kind of giddy, but I also would speak of it like I'm kind of anxious, or everything has been turned upside down. And I don't even know what way to go or what happened. And things in my life did turn upside down at the time. Yeah. So that is something like that, kind of relaxing, relaxing, following something like that, or or
And that really for me highlights the value, at least the value I place and have placed and still place on having people around me, and all the people who've been with me through all of that journey. I've no doubt for you too, like having, you said about, having a structure, whether that's the structure of a process or a practice, whether it's the structure of having just somebody there or a community of people there who are with you, who are by your side. Because when we're in the midst of this stuff, yes, our system will eventually right itself and rectify itself, because that's what it naturally does. Even if, even if we've had a spontaneous awakening, we've got nobody around us. Not always. Sometimes the old stuff just comes back in and we just go back to old ways. But it is possible to have an awakening and completely move through unsupported and find yourself in the same kind of experience we might be having without having had any guides or coaches or anything. But for me, there's just huge value in somebody who's there with you, who's walked the path before, who knows the kind of stuff that can happen, who can guide and point you so that it's like, oh, well, this kind of thing would be really helpful for you right now because there's this particular stage that you're moving through, or whatever it is. It's
Yes.
I
Yeah.
just and this, the internet, hallelujah, amazing for us being able to connect so easily with so many different people and modalities and structures and processes, and it's just incredible for that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. It's amazing. You can kind of be, and that something in us even can kind of catch the right thing at the right time, like,
Oh my God, so much. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it just
Yeah.
so happened. In fact,
Yes.
yeah, gosh, even just there was a few months ago, suddenly Abraham Hicks was permanently in my YouTube notifications.
Oh.
Now, they have kind of been in my world a bit.
Uh-huh.
There's of course correlation, but because of course everybody's really pointing to the same thing in their different ways.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, all of a sudden they were there in my feed the whole time, and it was just perfect. It was exactly what I needed to hear at the time. And
Oh, isn't
yeah,
that
it's like
fun?
it's happened again and again and again. Just like, yeah, the next thing comes and then it falls away, and then the
Yes.
next thing comes, and
Yes. I love that.
including Katie. In fact, I realized I didn't actually talk about the work in my journey, but it was there. So when I worked with Claire Diamond, Claire was the one who introduced me to Katie's work.
Oh, great.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so read a couple of her books, and yeah, would do the process, the inquiry process, with
Yes.
things that felt particularly sticky and tricky, and
Yes.
really so helpful to do those turnarounds and yeah, knock the
Boy,
edges off that ego that was so
yes.
sure that
Yes.
I'm right and they're wrong, and
Yeah. And this is happening to me, and this is happening to me. It really is happening to me,
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it can be, like I'll still notice those kinds of thoughts that come through about, oh, this can't be good. You know,
Oh,
that's
okay.
like it'll be a comment on like, uh-oh. Especially like with one of my children, for example, that's been kind of underway. I just watch and then I go, oh, I like that the process of the work is in here because it's like, right, you aren't the one in charge of how life goes for,
Mm,
yeah, there's a particular thing about mothering. It's an adult child, an adult
mm,
person
mm,
now, but like, oh, I don't, like I can watch the thing come through, like, I don't know if this is going to be a good thing. And then just to relax with that, like to kind of
yeah.
notice that something's, kind of spouts is still in there, like,
Mm,
and then wait, is it true?
mm,
Who would I be without that story? Who would I be without that story?
yeah.
So that's interesting there's still things will still come in and I've noticed like just sort of on the uh feeling like I'm beginning to walk the elder bridge, as they
Mm,
say. Um, so there's aging and death, as they say in
mm,
Buddhism. It's like this very more prominent, more in the forefront, like here it comes, or this is happening, and
mm,
I'm
mm.
kind of being somehow at peace with that, and just noticing the mind might not necessarily be so at peace with that. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't like that this is impermanent. I don't like that this is temporary. I don't like
Mm,
that there's
yeah.
this pain is here for no reason, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Other than this is what bodies do.
right, exactly, right, right, right,
Yeah,
right.
it's okay, mind. It's really okay. This
Yes,
is what happens. Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can see the journey still doing, all that it does and not wanting to
Yeah.
miss any of it, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
miss any of it. So
I'd
yeah,
love to just make a connection there, because when you were talking there about that, what's a natural process now for you of that, like the work just comes to mind, doesn't it? It's just It's like what would have in the past been the natural process was follow the story down and down and down into
Yes.
its
Yeah. And get
dark,
really worked
scary
up.
cave.
Yeah.
And now instead it's like natural processes that inquiry. It really highlighted for me, connecting back to what we said before about this distinction of awakening and enlightenment, because Katie's process absolutely, through that inquiry of the thinking, enlightens the thinking experience, enlightens our psychology. And then with that last question, who would you be without this thought? It's taking you right back to your awakened nature. Because everybody, when we get to that question, it's I would be free, I would be spacious, I would be relaxed, I would be happy, I would be, it's all these words, which are all
Yes.
words for our nature. It's
Yes.
so I love that how her process brings both elements in together, and that one feeds naturally through to the
Yeah.
remembrance of who we really are and the remembrance of that
Yeah.
awake essential nature that we are.
Yeah.
It's such a cool, yeah, amazing process for that reason.
It is. And I love that you're like just speaking to that, sort of saying that. I think that sometimes that's where with people in just inquiring, like sort of staying with the mind, it's maybe this is of just speaking for myself. Even though I had that 9 month period of wonder, in a way it was just pure wonder, kind of awe, and sometimes not so, it didn't mean it was necessarily bliss all the time. It was sometimes going like, what is happening? Like kind of a gasp, like,
Right.
what is going on here? My God, is this good? Like, anyway, but that there's there can be a lot of oh, I don't know, just unknown with that who we are without the thought. Like,
Mm, mm,
think of it as touching that or seeing it or being with it and then going, oh, but
mm.
I'm not sure there's anything here. Oh no. And then kind of scampering off or whatever. That sometimes happens with people
Oh
in
yeah,
work. It's kind of
yeah,
like, I don't know who I am. I mean, that's
yeah.
what I don't know. Um, and so I love that just some of what you're speaking to and your experience is um continually like just looking at that thing. Who are you really?
Mm,
Like staying
mm.
with that. Like all the different traditions speak of,
Yeah,
is the I.
yeah,
When I say I am, and what's there, and is it's not just about what isn't there. Yeah,
yeah. Well, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, because the mind gets terrified. It
yeah,
thinks there's nothing there. There's
yeah,
if who would I be? Well, all I see is emptiness. All I see is nothingness, and the mind yeah, like you say, scampers
yeah,
away. It's like, oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
terrifying.
Yes.
When in fact that's everything we're looking for. Like that's, or
Yes,
at least that's the truth of who we are that we're looking for.
yes,
That's the true security, that's the true love, that's the true groundedness. It's so weird that something that's empty and that appears to be nothing is everything
yes,
we're looking for. But yeah, in the beginning I've worked with plenty of people where, and with the book we see it a lot, where because that is looking directly at who we are and
yeah,
what we're not. And so the mind can get really upset about it.
yeah.
Some some people get quite cross with it because it's like
Uh,
their lives get turbulent because the system is getting anxious. It's like, where are you taking me? What are you doing? And for
yeah,
all the context we provide, for all the conscious ordering of the journey that people go through with the book,
yes,
even with all that, the system just gets ramped up and goes, oh my God, you're asking me to let go of all this stuff, which is who I think I am. And if I let go of all of that, oh my life, what will be left of me? It's just what a human
yeah,
system does. And
yes,
then bit by bit, yeah, it can relax and open and see, oh, that
yes.
nothingness is actually what I want. That is actually,
Yes, beautiful.
yeah,
I love it. And
yeah.
so I just love that you've written this book. And so I mean, which is beautiful, and that it kind of looks like starting here and just following, just moving along with these aspects of
Mm,
you know what we are, who we are, what we are, and just starting from something that looks understandable. Like it just looks understandable. So I love that
Yeah.
you all, so when did you all write this book? So you have a co-author.
Yeah, Sarah Priestley. Yeah.
Yes, okay. And you all it just was published, is that right? This
So
past year?
20, we wrote it 2022. So it
Okay.
was November 22 we published.
Yeah.
So yes, it's just over a year old, a year and a few months old. Um, yeah, so it was wonderful. It was the idea for the book was so clear when it came through for me. And I didn't expect to have a co-author, but then I happened to go on a webinar that Sarah was hosting, just like a freebie, and I thought, oh, I'll pop along and see what she's up to.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness, I have to ask if she wants to write this book together because everything she was doing on that webinar was exactly the kind of thing I wanted in the book. And yeah, so she was the perfect partner because in fact, she was already more established than me and had already been a teacher in all of this a lot longer than I had.
Ah,
Whereas for me, having just fairly newly come out of the full recognition and that real sense of okayness, like stabilized,
mhm.
um, for me, the book was almost like a learning process. Wanting to put some structure to what I knew absolutely 100%, and which I knew there was a really great journey to take people on, but which I'd never done in a structured way with people. So it was
Yeah.
like it was a
Yeah.
perfect partnership from that perspective because we both had the same intention with it. We both absolutely loved the idea that had shown up for it, and that partnership of um, both of us writing, and but just Sarah bringing that edge of clarity around the order of it all, and
Yeah.
and also for me, I kept writing because it's exploration based. We've made it practical, so it's like a workshop in a book. People say
Yes. Yes.
practical exercises, practical explorations, practical inquiries, so you can actually know it for yourself. Because otherwise, it's pointless. It's just another piece of content to learn and know. But yeah, I kept writing explorations, and she would come to them and she'd be like, yeah, so that's about 4 explorations in one there. So let's just spread that one out a little bit. In my excited state, I'd be like,
Yes.
and this and this and this.
Oh, that's so
And then
great. Right. Let's simplify. Let's simplify that.
just tease that out a little
Yeah.
bit to expand the and so
Yeah.
yeah, she was amazing for that.
Yeah.
Really, really so helpful. It was, yeah. In fact, the book started off being the Little Book of Awakening because I really thought it was going to be, I don't know, 80 pages long or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And no, it ended up we switched the name to the Complete Book, partly because it was so big. It's like it has to have something other than little.
Yeah.
Partly because for us it is the complete journey rather than stopping off at some people in non-duality get stuck at there is no self, and that's a
Yes.
really useful part of the journey, but it's not the full journey. So we really wanted to show people that completeness
Yeah.
of, yeah, the truth of the fact it's non-dual, not two.
Yeah. I actually really love that. I think it's related to the place that I've noticed, the who would I be without the thought? Ah, that it kind of can hover there, bit like
Mm,
I mean it doesn't always, but it can. And so yeah, I
mm,
just think that
mm.
that's wonderful that you've included that and that you have Sarah now. I don't know her, but um I love that you collaborated and did this. And well, and tell us a little bit about the Enlightenment Summit.
Yeah,
I would love.
yeah. Well, it's funny because at the end of the Book of Awakening, we actually say, and we're going to write another book, the Complete Book of Enlightenment. And it's not happened yet, but it will happen, absolutely will happen. And interestingly, this idea for the summit came through, and I was like, ooh, this could be like a test structure for the book. So anyway, I'll talk about the summit,
Yeah,
but that's kind of like that was
yeah,
when the idea
got
first
it.
arrived. It was like,
Ah,
oh yes, I can see this being a like a prototype kind of situation going
that's
on. Because it's
wonderful. Yeah,
quite different. The Enlightenment conversation is quite different to the Awakening one. So it will be quite a different book. It will still be practical. It would still be accessible. Whoever's interested, there's not going to be any kind of um, barriers or walls that say you're only allowed to engage with this if you're this certain type of person or religion or spirituality. It's like that's another
yeah,
thing that's important to us. This stuff is open for everybody.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Yeah, so this idea for the summit came through, which I just loved. Like the minute it arrived, it was like, oh, I'm so excited about this. So and then even more excited to get to meet people like you, Grace, as part of it. So yeah, so 3 days we're doing the summit for. We've got 12 speakers, and it goes back to what I said before about our enlightenment process and our enlightenment journey, kind of, in my experience anyway, has had to touch different aspects of my human experience. I started with the psychological. So yeah, I started with questioning thoughts.
Hmm.
I started with that kind of, is it true
Hmm.
process.
Hmm.
But then with time, more of the feelings and emotions became available, which had a lot of which had been hidden by the thinking. It was like the mind was the place to escape to avoid the feelings and emotion stuff.
Mm.
You know, like I don't want to feel like a failure. I don't want to feel like a disappointment. But in
Yeah.
the clearing of the psychological, all of that then became available. So it's like, oh, right, there's a bunch of emotional stuff here that I've never
Yeah.
been dared to experience because it looks like that's not allowed. That's dangerous. That's
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
So the emotional aspect comes in, the feelings. And then I've also seen how the body is such, it's very connected to the emotional, but there's also a different aspect with the body as well, where people have had, and this isn't me so much, but I've worked with a number of people where they've had physical experiences that are their body's way of saying, for God's sake, listen. You know, it's like
Yes.
the last port of call. Well, she's
Yeah.
not listened to our psychological messages. She's not listened to our emotional messages.
Yeah.
So, God damn it, we're going to use the body.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
really,
Yeah. Yes.
because when we
Yeah.
start to get pain, you know, pain that
Yeah.
isn't age, pain that isn't explicable by any medical doctor,
Yeah.
then we start to go, oh, situations that, you know, that perhaps physically limit us in our day-to-day life, then we start to listen, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah.
for me, it's so important that all those aspects are in there. And that's actually where the idea for the summit began. It was like, oh yeah, there's these three categories that are really, really valuable in an enlightenment conversation. And there's all these different modalities, like Katie's work, like breath work, like connecting inwardly with our emotional experience from an energetic perspective. Because I've tried loads of things along the way. My journey's been so eclectic. I've like been like a magpie, pick and mixing all the time.
Yeah.
Um, so in truth, it was really hard to, well, no, that was not true. It was very clear who to include in this summit. But what then came was, oh, I'll have to do another one because I also want to let people know about this and this and this and this and this. So there will probably be another
Yes.
one next year. Um, but yeah, so it started with those three categories. And then I was like, oh, but I'd really like to bring in the spiritual and that the awakening aspect, like we said, which comes at the end of Katie's inquiry, but which is
Yeah.
fundamentally the underpinning of all of life, never
Yes.
mind an exploration like this. So I was like, yeah, I'd like to bring in some spiritual stuff. Um, then I thought about my energy transmissions and like, oh yeah, I'd really like to bring in energy transmissions. So I brought in the holistic theme, which is the element of things which can't be categorized to either psychological, emotional, physical, or spiritual. Um, and then I thought, well, but when we go into an exploration, we need to know what we're actually enlightening. Like we need to know where we're starting. You know, I quite often reference Alcoholics Anonymous and the value of we have to start by saying, oh, this is happening. Like we have to start with that honesty
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
of recognition. I guess like I did when I first came to this, and that honesty of, oh, I am completely different with my clients than how I am with my kids. Like there had to have
Yes.
been that honest recognition first of all.
Yeah.
So that then actually put the very first theme onto the summit, which is about making it visible. It's, well, what even is here for enlightenment? You know, what even is there in my system, which is sending things a bit skew if?
Yeah.
What is ready for one of these other enlightenment modalities?
Yeah.
So that then provided the full pathway with starting with that make it visible through yours and Amy's theme of psychological into emotional, physical, spiritual, and then closing with holistic, so that we close with the all-encompassing. Yeah, so
I
I'm
love
so
that.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's actually really sweet. It's just a little bit, just to hear you say it and the way you've said it is a little different, like, oh, that's how it got sparked, and then, kind of how it was born and what looked like it was need to come first. And that's great.
Mm, mm,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love that it's just an offering, like a summit, like people can just sign up for it. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
yeah, it's coming soon, January.
Yeah, yeah. 17th we start.
Yes.
Um, and there'll be access to the recordings until the morning of UK 22nd. So I guess for you guys on Pacific, it'll be like your Sunday evening.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so kind of like however many days that is. It's about 5 or 6 days, I think, of access to the content
Yeah.
and to all the free gifts. So each of you guys as speakers, of course, are bringing a free gift so that everyone has something, again, practical,
Yeah. Yes.
to then
Yes.
dive a little bit deeper. Like, okay, I
Yes.
like Grace's stuff. Let me hear a little bit more about Grace's stuff, so
Yeah.
that everybody will get an extra taster
Yeah.
of each, yeah, each person and their modality, their approach, their technique, whatever it is they're bringing.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
love it. I mean, and there's people that there's some that I know and some that I never heard before ever. And so it's just fun,
Mm.
fun for me to even like, I go, oh, like what's she doing over there? And it's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and for me too, so I think there were 5 people to begin with that was so obvious. It was like, oh yes, that's definitely that person. Then Amy connected me to you, and that was like perfect.
Yes.
And then there was around the emotional and physical, there was much more question mark. There was much more like, oh, there's a number of empty slots there, and I'm not sure who's going to be the right people. But that all happened beautifully as well, with recommendations from others in my community and network, and um, some people who they said no because of personal reasons, or I said no to them because they didn't feel aligned with what we were doing here. So, and even with that, in the past, I've been terrible. There's no other word for it. I've been terrible for saying yes to people, even though in my heart I know it's not right.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
I've said yes to things, and then later down the track I've gone, oh, I really shouldn't have said yes to that.
Yeah.
I knew from the beginning that wasn't aligned.
Yes. Isn't that
Whereas
an
there was,
interesting little just I think it's one of the things in enlightenment right there. It's kind of like just
yeah,
what it means to say yes and no and be in touch with your
yeah.
inner yes or no, which is right there
Oh
often,
my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just assumed that if I said no to people, I was being mean, I was being horrible, I would
Yeah.
be upsetting them.
Yeah.
I was wrong
Yeah.
fundamentally for saying that.
Yeah.
And yeah, what I've come to realize and have the actual experience of is that when you're actually just being true to that yes or no without the baggage, there's no consideration, there's no concept of hurting someone. It's just, yeah, this isn't
Yeah.
this isn't match, this isn't connecting.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the people who was going to be doing a version, so we've got somebody coming to do sound as a way to let the body speak, vocalizing the body.
Beautiful.
And I really wanted that who we've got, or the kind of person we've got, which is a very intuitive, very much tuning into the body and listening, making the sound it wants to make. And the original person was much more kind of traditional singing, which is lovely. Singing's a great thing to do, and we can feel great doing it. And he has lots of fun with the people he works with. But there was like this question mark to begin with, and then I spent some more time with him, and there was just like, no, it's not aligned, it's not intuitive like I wanted it to be.
Uh-huh.
Far
Uh-huh.
too heady. There's too much learning words and notes.
Uh-huh.
I need to get people out of their heads. We
Yeah.
don't want to be
Yeah.
going into the head.
Yeah. Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, but when I said to him, it's just not feeling like a match. It doesn't feel aligned with what we're doing here. Love what you're doing. I can see it working here. I could see it working here, but it's just not for this kind of thing. And it was amazing. And he came back going, oh, I really get it. And here's 2 or 3 people you might want to speak to as alternatives who are doing the kind of thing you're looking for. And my mind would
Yeah.
never have known that as a possibility. It would always have said that story of, oh, you can't say no because that's mean.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this world of, oh yeah, you can say no,
Yeah.
and great
Yes.
things come from it. you
Yeah,
know?
yes, yes. It's almost like being able to just see or imagine or trust even just a little bit what it might look like if it's not mean, like if you don't have that
Yeah.
thought, if you don't have that story, and sometimes you just get
Yeah.
locked in the, I mean, that's a big thing. I think it's a very big, I don't know, maybe I zoned in on it because I do so much work with people with eating or compulsion, addiction issues, and just all the thinking, especially food. And isn't that something to say no, and that it will be mean, and it's mean to some part
Mm,
of you. It's,
mm,
I'm cutting off some part over here, and that's dangerous, and it's worth hurting something or somebody within my system,
wow.
and
Yeah.
because it's too risky to not say no anyway. So I just
Yeah. I love that.
yeah,
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
about that, and yeah,
And that's so true, isn't it? What everything happens at every level. So
yes,
whatever it is that's happening on the outside is
yeah,
happening somewhere on the inside as well, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I
Oh,
love all
beautiful.
this, everything that's going to be, I'm looking forward to uh just just the people, and what will be shared. And so um
Yeah.
we'll have the way for people to sign up
Yes,
also
absolutely.
here.
We'll share that link too.
Yeah.
That's actually just very quickly, that's another really important aspect from this for this summit for me, is that we're all in a community space together. So whenever I've been on summits before, nothing wrong with it, but I've always just received emails with the videos on and that's it. And you watch the videos and then you follow up with whichever people you're interested in. Um, Whereas for this one, we're hosting it within a community space because that was another part of the idea that came through. It's like, oh yes, and then to have everybody in that space together with all the speakers so that everyone can connect and ask their questions and have that follow up, because there's always such richness between the official
Yes.
bits, isn't there?
Oh
And
yeah.
so I love that we can bring that as well and have that engagement and conversation around
Yeah.
it.
It's so powerful. I love that you're doing that community thing. I mean, boy, on every level, speaking of things coming out on every level, it's as if everyone's sort of sharing, and there's no suppression of any either part of us or people, or I need to do this so like in a silo kind of a feeling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Who knows what can happen. It's just amazing.
yeah,
I love working in groups, when I
yeah.
am doing my work a lot. It's just something so profound about doing it in groups. Nothing wrong with a one-on-one either, of course. There's
Mm,
something
mm,
important. Sometimes that's just right. But then the
yeah,
group aspect is very
yeah,
transformational. Yeah.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
on that, can we give a little taster as well? Because of course, after the summit, we're moving into the Enlightenment event, where you guys are all coming back and running longer
Yes.
workshops, which is exactly that, the opportunity to get into closer contact with people, be
Yes.
in a deep dive workshop together. So yeah, create an even more impactful and powerful experience for people to actually experience your work with them
I'm really
and
looking forward to
yeah,
that.
go that
Yeah.
level deeper with you. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that'll be and very, very alive. And, I just really like that. It's sort of like whatever's needs to be happening right there with this work of,
Mm.
self-inquiry that I seem to have become. So whatever you call it, knowledgeable in, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's the way, it's been like the avenue.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's going to be exciting. So
Mm. Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, I love having the
Yeah.
opportunity. I'm so grateful, and um, I think people will really appreciate hearing what you've had to share today, and then if it feels right for them to,
Mm.
do look look further and
Mm.
see what's needed for themselves in their own life. Because I love that there's a smorgasbord of life, you know, and that
Yeah.
you just then in tune with yourself what you'll
Yeah.
be choosing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Totally that. Totally
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And in fact, that's taken me all the way back to when I was saying about the when I was leaving my corporate job and how helpful it was to have the other job offer as well as the possibility of going self-employed, because actually the strength of no to the job offer helped me know that it was a yes to the self-employment. So it's
yeah,
kind of the same with this. Like I
yeah,
really see that not every person who comes to the summit won't like every person who's speaking and won't like every modality.
yeah,
That's perfect. And
yeah,
actually, in hearing from some of the ones that your system says no to, can help clarify the ones that your system's saying
Yes.
yes to.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that just came through as you were sharing
That's a
that. So I thought,
lovely
yeah,
thing too. Yeah. And that sometimes those, you rotate around. How many times people have said, like, I read Byron Katie 15 years ago, but now is the time.
yes,
Who knows that'll
yes,
happen in your, the
yeah,
people's awareness of whatever's right for them. But like you just, that something gets drawn towards what is needed.
yeah,
And you can
yeah,
trust that part that's within, that's guided in that direction. And yeah,
yeah,
I love that
yeah.
you have it so you can see it all.
Yeah. Take your pick.
Yeah,
What do you fancy?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I love that you've created it and that you're organizing it. I know it takes a lot of, um, just all the energy to build that and follow the breadcrumbs, and
Yeah,
build it
yeah,
out and stuff. So I love that you've
yeah.
done that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's wonderful. Honestly, I've enjoyed it. It's a classic example of when genuine inspiration hits. It's
Yeah.
not like work, it's
Yes.
been thoroughly enjoyable. And yes, hard work, lots of
Yes.
effort and attention given to it, but
Yes.
not with any kind of
Yeah.
grudge or,
It's like,
it's all
yeah, not like this. More
it's
like this.
yeah, it's like yay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Grace.
Oh
I've
my
so
goodness.
appreciated this conversation. Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
wonderful.
Just wonderful. All right. Yeah. Take wonderful care. Thank you so
Thank you, and
much.
you. Thank you.